Hello, Albertans, and yet again we have with us a beautiful person. And why do I say beautiful? Is because all these people who are in this public service, who actually come out of their comfort zones and stand up for the rights of people, they want to take up issues, they want to take up concerns, they want to take the humanity to the next level. They are actually beautiful. We are so busy in the bread and butter, and that's what consumes us. But when we have people like Lynn Lekisch today, the candidate from Central Peace-Notley and the candidate for the Alberta party, her life has been, I would say, we should celebrate these kind of lives, people who dedicated to the community. Yesterday I had a word with her. She was running to the vet with a she's into the business of livestock, and look at the dedication of people, whether it's animal, whether it's humans, whether it's issues, going through so much herself in the medical space. She just wants to ignore all that and stand up for the people, beautiful people. So Lynn, just tell us something about yourself and just let people know who you are.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Risha. Um, I would like to take this time to recognize that I am located on Treaty 8, the traditional territory of the Cree and Beaver people, in memory of my mother, who was Cree and Beaver. And we're also on, sorry, my mom just passed recently, so I'm
Sorry.
still a little bit sensitive over that. And I'd also like to recognize that I also am residing on Métis Nation 6 traditional lands as well. So just recognizing both the Indigenous groups in the area. Now, I grew up in the area of Fairview, Alberta, which is in Clare Hills County, and in, of course, Central Peace-Notley, which is the electoral district for the province of Alberta. And being, I did move away briefly to study in university and for life choices and employment. And then in 2018, I returned to the north permanently, and I I enjoy being up here. This has always been my home, and it was my mother's home before that, and my father immigrated here in the 50s from Europe and never left. So I live on our traditional farm that I grew up on when I was a little girl, and I'm pleased to be able to do that. So um, previous to that, my grandfather was actually the doctor in the area in the 50s and into the 60s before he finally moved to Edmonton. So I knew a lot of the local people at that time. It was an improvement district. There were barely any roads. There were no power. There was no infrastructure up here, and I think there were two roads going north to south through the whole area. And the county itself is about 12,000 square kilometers, and right now it only has about 3,000 residents that live here. So it's a very vast area with not a lot of people living here. And in the 80s, when I was here, I think the population was only about 600. So we've come a long way with growth. Yeah, and it's interesting, to be able to spend my life up here and to know the families up here and to see how it has grown. And that leads me to the reason why I wanted to actually get into the political arena up here, just because of the fact that my family before me and myself, we've got roots in the community. The land that our farm occurs on was my grandfather's traditional trap line. So it has gone from, barefoot, like wild lands to farmlands. And we still try and maintain that, preserving our watersheds here. Always grew up with a very environmental conscious, attitude towards agriculture. And that's what led me to become an environmental scientist
Wow.
eventually. So I've been doing that for, my professional career of the last 25 years as working as an environmental scientist,
Wow.
predominantly in oil and gas. And prior to that, I was a paramedic with the BC Ambulance Service. And then before that, I I briefly dabbled in journalism, but
Wow.
unfortunately for me, my journalism forays took me to the front lines and too much of a a war zone environment, and I think I was too young to actually process that. I should have waited until I was in my 40s instead of trying to do it in my 20s. I guess I could
No,
run faster then.
that's lovely. I think, a career in journalism gives you so much of exposure, takes you out there. And I think you need to be more mentally prepared here to take that information. That's I think where we, at times just lose it and we start questioning the world too much. So how come this transitioning from a scientist, environmental scientist, and a journalist, and then into real politics? Because as I understand that you were also the running candidate from the NDP till
Okay.
July 22.
Um, the I was always a supporter of the NDP. I believe that we do need some form. We do need to ensure that there is democracy in our province, and we do need to ensure that there's space for you know, social environments. And I'm not going to go so far as saying social reform, but we have to ensure that the society as a whole is being accounted for, and we have to represent them, and we have to be an advocate not only for social justice, and we also have to be an advocate for democracy and making sure that that is perpetuated. And when we get provincial governments in place that forget that, and they only cater to lobbyists and large urban environments where the demographics can support their seats and their political career in legislature, we get away from the majority of the province's needs. So we don't have a huge population in Alberta, and a lot of our residents are rural individuals who live in small rural communities or on in the countrysides. And a lot of times our political leaders tend to just focus on the large urban centers. So we've got Calgary and Edmonton, and then Lethbridge, Red Deer, maybe if we're lucky, Medicine Hat and Lloydminster will fall into that place. And now, most recently, Fort McMurray and Grand Prairie. So we don't have a lot of huge cities within our province, and to have all of our decision making coming from those centers and not reflecting the needs of all the community residents in small hamlets and villages and towns throughout the province, and agriculturists and livestock producers, they tend to get lost in the mix. And it's
Lynn,
by
we will hold this thought because when you say that the decision making is looking at the perspectives of bigger cities or the urban areas, but there always has been a very good rural representation. If you remember, there was once a political party by the name of Social Credit, or they were the United Farmers. That's where the whole progressive conservative movement started, and that's what they dissolved into. If you look at that, is it that the farmer is busy today to represent, or is it that there is a section of people who've got into politics and they are just going into politics, and the farmers are no longer interested in politics?
um okay, if you bring up the United Farmers Association, so that's going back over
Yeah, yeah.
almost a century
Yeah,
there. And
because I think till the time we don't link it to that part of the history, we will not
yeah.
figure out why today the decisions are just being made on the urban lines. Why is the rural representation not happening?
Yeah, I do want to unpack that a little bit just because you brought it up. So the United Farmers ended up morphing into the Social Credit Party, which ultimately ended up becoming the New Democrat Party of Alberta.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the New Democrats never ever even their the goal was um, I think their goals moving forward were established for decades, but they could never achieve representation in legislature until finally in 2015 there was a bit of headway where the New Democrats were able to actually be represented in the province at significantly enough to actually obtain a premiership. Um, it's unfortunate that they were unable to flex their wings. I think that they were, even though the party had been around for decades, they just didn't. They were like a fledgling. They didn't have the experience in the political arena to actually exercise what they did, and they ended up being only a one term party. And that is one of the I had always supported democracy and social justice. So the New Democrat Party of Alberta really spoke to my beliefs and my fundamentals. And I would have, you know, I'm now the candidate for the Alberta Party, moving away from the New Democrats. But who's to say that somewhere in the future the New Democrat message may not speak to me again, and that might be my choice at the polls. And that I'm going to use that as a segue to speak directly to voters. You really do have to focus on the individual that's representing your community and your constituency, and not necessarily who is representing you in the legislature. What happens in your area, the decisions there um, are represented by your MLA that you have duly elected.
Isn't
Now,
that
unfortunately,
isn't that beautiful, Lynn? The constituency that you are from is actually named on the name of Mr. Grant Notley himself. And this is how beautiful democracy is. This is how beautiful democracy is. That's what talks about. This is exactly what you're saying. That's how the contributions of humans are put into, that's how they become an inspiration. So Grant Notley was an inspiration for the rural sector. And today, irrespective of his political affiliations, there is a constituency named after him.
yes, this is true. Yeah, they changed the name of the constituency in 2015 or 2016, and just honored our previous Grant Notley, and also honored his daughter Rachel Notley to actually follow in her father's footsteps. And I was lucky enough to have been able to have met Mr. Notley, and to know the family as a child. And we've had some really good representatives in legislature from this constituency. And right now we've got a UCP representative, and Todd Lowen is very, um, he's a pleasant man. He's got roots in his community, and I do have to say I have respect for the fact that he's actually committed to the area that he resides in.
He stood up for his people. I mean, definitely, he stood up for his people,
Yeah,
irrespective of what the party would have said. He just stood up for the people.
yeah,
I think it's a huge compliment for him there that despite the fact that the party didn't like what he said what needed to be said.
yeah.
That's the thing.
You
That's
go
it.
back to the question, like,
Yes.
are some of the players in the political system, are they looking at it to represent the citizens in their constituency, or are they doing it as a career move, like a lifetime career move as a politician? And then we go back to like Todd Lowen as well. He campaigned, and he ran I think 5 or 6 different in elections, starting in 2002. And then
Yeah.
you look at Miss Mark McQuaid Boyd, who eventually won with the NDP here in 2015. That wasn't her first rodeo trying to win, the constituency. She ran up here 7 different times.
Yeah.
And a lot of individuals, I think it's hard to dissect which part of their will or their drive to actually be involved in politics is truly just because they're trying to advance their career, or if they actually do want to be a change agent within the system. And
That's
I
a
think that
beautiful word, the change agent. So, how do you think you can be a change agent, Lynn, today?
I think I can be a change agent because I understand the system. I have a very broad perspective, and I've got a diverse background. I'm not limited by, my degree or my upbringing, or, any institutional education, or even any real life education. I've done a lot of things, and I bring with all that experience of the School of Hard Knocks, the theoretical understanding, the practical hands-on experience that I've had. And I bring all that with me, not just as an environmental scientist, not just as a retired paramedic or a firefighter. I bring everything that I've ever done with me. And there are not a lot of individuals that can actually say that, into their 50s that they've had, you know, five major careers that they can focus on. A lot of individuals tend to follow through, you know, political science, do research, and then stay in that and then get into politics, or they study law and get into politics from that perspective. Um, I think that we do not have a lot of individuals who are coming into grassroots politics that actually have grassroots existences anymore.
This is very important thing that you're mentioning here right now, that not many people are actually, not many youngsters are now getting into politics, even if they are, which I witnessed in my career into the recently in Alberta, that even if the interns who are coming as volunteers into the political offices, they are just coming there for a certificate. What is the reason that the youngsters are not getting into the political environments and trying to, what is it that's not inspiring these youngsters to get into politics?
Okay, I think there's a group mentality that humans actually abide to a certain degree, and if you're in a rural community or a rural environment, even an urban environment, and you're not part of a larger group that can actually mentor you or draw you into these, you know, group gatherings to volunteer for politics, to be supportive of anything like that, then you don't know as a youngster that they even occur there. So the majority of volunteers that I find that are actually engaging in political volunteerism and political activism tend to be the post-secondary education students.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people who are working in the political arena will tend to find the groups that support their party or their, you know, their party's mandate or policies, and then create an alliance with them, and that's where they pick up their volunteers. And other than that large group environment where you can actually have boards or other processes for engaged students to actually start to participate on, they're not going to get involved, because a high school student, I I seem to see that they're very involved in, you know, being part of their sport after school sports activities. They're very involved in, you know, trying to excel their own, you know, graduation process of high school. And there's not a lot of,
Yeah.
you know, it's in small communities, there's not a lot of opportunity for them to actually be engaged in with larger urban centers.
Yeah,
And especially
you
if
don't
they're
get to
traveling.
see young revolutionaries with young revolutionary thoughts. You want to do this, you want to change this. Everybody's so focused on careers. Let's get more focused onto the constituency now. Let's talk
Well,
what is important. What are the issues that you, as Lynn, Lekisch, looks at the constituency, and the concerns that you really want to stand up for the next 4 years if you become the MLA?
okay. Well, of course, they're the top three that every political party is chasing right now, and that is medical coverage in our rural areas. We need to support our ancillary services, our senior care, and also ensure that our already established institutions and healthcare clinics can actually remain viable and functional and be able to have enough staff to service the communities that they're actually providing the service for. So that's the primary one, is the healthcare option, and then education is the next huge hurdle that every party out there actually has to address. That with education, it's it's difficult. Like in the larger urban areas, there's an availability of students that are always going to be able to attend the institution, and there's probably always going to be a roster of educators. But once you move out to rural areas and smaller, you know, hamlets that have small schools that only have like the entire school might only have 200 students, it's harder to secure enough staff to actually carry that through. And then it's also hard to plan and budget in the long term because you don't know how many children are going to be in the area. And like I said, the area that I come from, we only have 3,000 people in the entire
Yeah.
constituency. So that's the second concern. And then the third concern is goes to, for me, I look strongly at socioeconomic issues based on our rural tax base and how that applies to what we pay as a proportion of provincial taxes and federal taxes. So if you're living in, no matter where you live in Alberta, you're going to have to pay three tiers of taxes, and that's even before we get to GST and all the subcharges. So we have to be cognizant of where that money is going, and that's why that is one of my top three priorities, because we are now looking at a situation where Albertan taxpayer dollars tend to fund large, corporations with the Orphan Well program, with pipelines. We tend to get trapped in subsidies and royalty issues. We are trapped in municipalities right now where a lot of large oil and gas producers are not paying their taxes that are owed to municipalities. And because the municipalities are not making that extra money that they budgeted for the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, now that tax base actually gets shifted onto the residents in the area. So we have to be cognizant of everything like that. And then, of course, I would like to be able to say that I want to assess every single thing, like automobile insurance and utility riders, but that's another conversation. I think
Yeah,
for me,
automobile insurance, I think, is a huge thing that needs. We've been talking about this capping and the ceiling of this automobile insurance for a while now. There have been
yes.
people, even the finance minister, he also mentioned that they were looking at certain things of this order. Uh, Not talking about this as a automobile insurance for the farm. We look at the farmers. They need to maintain big, vehicles over there, big automobiles, whether it's harvest machines or we have these huge things. So that must be quite a cost for them.
Yeah, there is a significant cost to any rural, like whether they're a cereal or a forage producer or a livestock producer. There's a lot of insurance costs that go on, and unfortunately when you're in that business, you don't just have one vehicle parked out in
Yeah.
front of the house. There's
Yeah.
usually multiple vehicles. And my example right now, because I'm an environmental scientist and I'm a consultant, so I provide a service, my vehicle insurance costs, I pay over $5,000 a year just for my work truck. And that doesn't include my professional liability insurance and my errors and omissions insurance. So when it all starts at, and then I have a personal vehicle that I drive and I have to pay insurance on that. And then, there's always other members of the household. So I look at the 5 vehicles that are parked outside and I'm like, oh my goodness, I need a full-time job just to pay insurance.
So is
And
that
another,
is that 5 vehicles an average number of vehicles that normal people, average people staying in rural areas have? Which means that this is a huge issue for Alberta, because almost 40% of the population, 40%, like the rural constituencies are around 40. So which means this is one big issue that you guys should really look at. I mean,
well, this is
automobile
true.
insurance is huge. I mean, we talk about federal taxes, we're talking about provincial taxes, or also about the municipal taxes. But automobile insurance for people over there, like the numbers that you are mentioning, are like huge.
Oh, they're massive, and just as a small snippet, let's say you've got a livestock producer. They generally have a tractor that's large enough to pull an animal liner, so they have to insure and register that. And then they probably have a grain truck, and then they probably have another truck with a smaller stock trailer, and then they, you know, um, there's any number of vehicles that they're going to have on their property. And like I said, I would, it's a safe bet to say that anybody is going to have 5 vehicles parked outside, and that might not even be a personal passenger vehicle yet. It might
I
be
think there's some real advocacy needed over there for automobile insurance in that in the rural Alberta. Now looking at this, so you don't have any big cities. You don't have any civic areas per se in that constituency, which is just
we
28,000 people. Roughly, is that what that constituency has? Where you're representing around 30,000
no,
people.
um, Central Peace-Notley itself stretches includes the county that I live in. So Central Peace-Notley constituency area actually is um, includes Central Clear Hills County, includes Spirit River,
There's
the
Fairview, there's Fox Creek, Spirit
yeah,
River, Valley View,
yeah,
and
Greenview
then you
and
have the six municipalities and the reserves too.
yeah, and they're in. I think the population in all of Central Peace Notley is about. Don't quote me on this, but it's somewhere about 6,050 people live in the entire area. So it's not a lot of people. There's not a lot of votes that are going to come from this area, but it is such a large area. It is like 5 hours to drive from one at the north end to the south end, and
How's the
another
policing there? How does the how is policing there? I mean, there was also something that had come up for having a provincial policing. There was there were I think UCP was talking about having a provincial police. So what do you have to say about that?
Okay, so this has traditionally always been an RCMP monitored area, which, like most of rural Canada,
Mhm.
um, I don't think with the demographics that we have in these small communities and these rural areas that you can afford to have a privatized police service that's funded. Um, it still we do rely heavily on the federal services, and to actually Grand Prairie just transitioned now to trying to perpetuate a city police in the city of Grand Prairie, and to the cost is going to be upwards like they're claiming 4 times more than what it costs to actually have the RCMP still maintain their services. But I've worked in budgetary planning for too many years that I know if they say it's going to be 4 times, it'll probably be 8 or 10 times by the time it's done. So statistical analysis
It's
actually
just-
increases exponentially every time somebody, anytime there is a block in the system or a challenge in the system, it will always increase the cost or the actual resources that are required for that. So I am not um, a fan of moving to a provincial police system just because of the added costs that it's going to bring. Now, going back to being a change agent, what if there is a change agent and they do have all of the reference material indicating why that's going to be a good choice? But right now, nobody's been able to really present that. The only private police forces that we have in Alberta right now are the cities of Edmonton and Calgary
That's right.
and Lethbridge, and um, they all three of those independent police forces for the cities have their challenges, and they still rely heavily on
And the
the
RCMP.
MP.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
So
don't think we would be able to have the coverage that we have now with the RCMP because of the stations that are already established, and then the cost and the training and how do you train an entire, like, let's say 50 police force members for my area, and then have them be able to transition to another area and move around as fluidly as the RCMP can right now, because there's massive training centers, they've already got it established, and they can transfer anywhere in the nation. It doesn't make a lot of sense right now. Larger urban centers, somewhere where there's a lot of demographics, the greater the population, the more revenue that's available for change like that, then yes, you can actually start to consider that. But in rural areas, it's not really feasible.
I must compliment you. You've kind of done so much of working on everything that's required in that area, everything that's to be done for the constituency. Like you were telling me that you were the president, or you were the president of the association for your constituency from NDP.
Okay, yeah, I was actually the vice president
President.
for 5 years, and then I became the interim president um, in in 2021, and that was the year that I actually submitted my intent to run as a nomination contestant for the NDP. I had been working very hard just to make sure that the constituency association was able to transition into the 20th century, 21st century, because there were a few people that coordinated everything, and I wanted to encourage the fact that we had more people involved. We actually were making a larger presence, that we were held accountable for every decision that we were making, and those minutes could actually go out to any member of the constituency. So I was trying to grow the system so that it had more exposure. And I took on that problem as a project manager. We have to plan these steps out for 1, 5, and 10 years into the future, because this is something that if you actually establish the groundwork, which had never really been established in this constituency, and you make sure that it's perpetuated. And then I called for a nomination contest, and when I submitted my letter of intent to actually be a nomination contestant, Central Peace-Notley had not had a nomination contest in 34 years since Grant Notley died. And I was astounded by that. It's like, wow, every person that represented in this constituency just went, well, I'm going to run, and that's it. And we're not even going to have a contest.
But I think officially the constituency came into existence as a separate constituency in 2017, and the first time ever Central Peace Notley as a constituency of the
But
87 constituencies came in 2019 with Mr. Ted Loyan as the first MLA. Is that right?
no, it's not. There was a name change. It was Dunvegan Central
Yeah,
Peace
yeah. And
before.
did they change the geographical area for the constituency, or it was a mix?
The geographical area that was it was gerrymandered back in 2014, I believe, when they actually changed the boundaries, the
Yeah.
southernmost boundaries, and then in 2015, um, I'm not really sure if that included Fox Creek at that point, but I'm pretty sure that's when the boundaries were changed, and
Yeah,
they
but still
remained.
the population is of the constituency is lower than what an average constituency population generally is.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. It was a I'm not really sure if they should have included the southernmost region, like anything south of Valley View. Fox Creek is so much closer to Whitecourt, and the area of activity and the needs and requirements seem to be more suited to the Whitecourt area. But for whatever reason, when they redrew the boundaries for the southern portion of the constituency, they included that little loop down there. So
Got
it tends to cover a lot of area, um, and I'm not like, it's tough to say as an MLA in a constituency that's vast like this, that has so many far-reaching communities, that you could represent somebody in the extreme northwest portion, and also be able to have member like constituency residents in Fox Creek represented without you actually physically traveling to them. So the MLA's office has always traditionally been in Fairview, Alberta,
yeah.
and because Todd Lowen won the last election, he had a satellite office in Fairview, because that's what's registered with Elections Alberta. But then he had his primary office in Valley View, and I do have to say, even though he does get to try and make a presence at all of the area events that occur throughout the constituency, I've never seen the office open. And
That's that's very interesting. So Mr. Lohan is busy with the politics in Edmonton most of the time, it seems, from this situation, because if the office is not open. Also, taking the conversation forward, Lynn, we have to have lots of conversations with you. We have to come and we're looking forward to meeting you in April when we come down to uh, the place and look at your farm, meet you in person. Any special
Okay.
message would want to give right now for people who are watching you? You as the candidate, listening to you right now, talking to you right now, whatever's in your brain seems like a perfect picture for the constituency. And I'm sure more and more people should understand that there is a person over there who's just bothered about what's going to how can I better this place, how can I look at better things for this place. So what would be your message to the people of the constituency, and and why do you think they should look forward to you as their new MLA at coming up MLA?
Okay, so I'm going to use that to explain why I decided to support the Alberta Party and move
Yes,
away
please.
from the NDP. Um, I'd always had, watch the Alberta Party and what was going on there, because we are trapped in a two-party system, and we have been trapped in a two-party system for quite some time, like for the last 40 years. Briefly, the Liberals made a little bit of a blip on the map in Calgary and Edmonton, but that was never experienced in any of the rural constituencies. And out of out of the 87 constituencies, over 39 of them are rural, and they cover vast areas. So we many of those rural constituencies have never voted for anybody other than a conservative party, whether it was a progressive conservative or a Wild Rose or any of the other machinations that ultimately became the United Conservative Party. So there's no option for anybody who's a centrist to actually find a party that they can align with, and that's where the Alberta Party dovetail. It I think that there's an area to be able to introduce a viable third party into the system. I don't. I'm not really sure if we'll anytime soon we'll be able to get past the first past the post type of politics. But at least if we can get away from a two-party system and have a third viable option in the system, then it gives voters a little more opportunity to align with their fundamentals and to find a party that presents, a policy and platform. Like I said, all three parties have their top three are going to be education and healthcare and
You're right.
uh, a tax base. And but find the party that aligns best with you, and not necessarily just the party. Find the candidate within your constituency that will be your voice in legislature, and that voice has to be an accountable voice in legislature and has to be able to represent your needs. Um, you know, make sure that I will never go out and tell anybody who to vote for, and that's what I believe. That's what I find beautiful about the Alberta Party, because there's um, there's the autonomy for potential MLA candidates to actually act for on what they believe is best for the constituency that they're representing. Meanwhile, still understanding the message and the policy and the vision and the principles within the Alberta Party. And the Alberta Party encapsulates and captures a lot of different platforms, items that rural residents can actually, identify with. And that's why I moved over to the Alberta Party. I was very, um, we need change. We
That's
need to be able
that's
to move
exactly
forward.
what Barry. That's exactly what in my discussion with Barry came forward. He says Alberta needs a change.
Yeah,
Definitely, Alberta needs a change, and these words actually resonate so much from what you said in the last statement. Resonates exactly to the interview discussion that we had with him, where he said the same thing. It's about the candidate.
yeah,
Let's not just look at the colors. Let's look at the candidates, because it's the candidates that needs to represent the constituency. That's going to be your man. That's going to be your person. So focus on your person. Get the right person in the right chair. That's what is more important. Thank you so much, Lynn. This was wonderful having you, listening to you, and the amazing love that you have for humanity, to livestock, to plants to nature. It's commendable. All the best for the elections, and may the best person get the seat there, because that's what people deserve. That's
This
what they.
is true.
That's
You know,
all the
that's
best. Thank you so much for your time. And would you have any message for viewers or people who are engaging with Voice Alberta with us? Any message that you would want to tell them, that how the democratic process needs to be more open. Needs to have more exposure. It needs to be more awareness to people.
yes. I think the primary message that I have is don't ever forget that you have the right to vote, and you need to vote for yourself um, first, not with emotion, but with logic and foresight. And then you also have to consider that your vote is for your neighbors and your friends and your family and the community that you're within. So
And the
exercise your right to
generations to come. And the
vote.
generations to come.
Yes, this is true. So exercise your right to vote and make it you know a knowledgeable vote and not an emotional one.
That's 100%. Thank you so much, Lynn. Hope to keep talking to you, keep understanding the issues of the constituency, and all the very best. Take care of
Okay,
yourself. God bless you. Thank you.
thank you, Richa. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.